Hello and welcome. I'm your host and speaker Vijeth, and I am MuleSoft developer at Information. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. So in today's webinar, I will be talking about error handling in MuleSoft. Feel free to drop questions on the topic or share your struggles and experiences during this live session. We will answer your queries through chat. Let's start the session. So this session is organized by Infometry. So we are a pure play data analytics company based out of Fremont, California, with our offshore development center in Bangalore, India. We came into Inception back in 2010, and since then we have been offering domain-specific analytics solutions for high-tech energy, life sciences, retail, manufacturing, and finance customers. Infometry has been an engineering and consulting services partner for companies like Informatica, Matillion, Snowflake, Tableau, Adaptive Insights, Looker, etc. So in addition to the services, we have also developed more than 15 cloud connectors for ISCs. One mentioned under the blue blocks are developed and owned by us, and the rest are all developed by us only for organizations like Informatica, SAP, Calidius, etc. So we have developed state-of-the-art analytic solutions in Popiscus, which can be hooked to any on-prem or cloud CRM/ERP or planning apps. So InfoFiscus is 100% cloud-based, pre-built analytics software developed using an open architecture. InfoFiscus comes in three different flavors: finance, supply chain, and sales and marketing analytics. So that's our quick introduction, and now let's move to our today's agenda. So in today's getting started with today's topic, error handling in MuleSoft, we'll be discussing about how to handle the errors efficiently in MuleSoft. So first, before handling, we'll go to the main topic. We'll discuss what is an error first. So an error means an exception occurs when unexpected event happens while processing. So when we are processing something and there is an unexpected event happen, we can call it as an error. So how to handle that? How to handle that error? So error handling is in MuleSoft. Error handling is the most important part in MuleSoft while developing in APIs, especially while developing in APIs. So now we will see. So error handling is the process of responding to errors when a computer program runs. So whenever there is a program is running and there is an unexpected event happens, so we need to respond to that particular event. So for that process, we can call it as error handling. So error handling in Mule can be handled in different ways. So we can make use of different levels of error handling and also error handling scopes. So and when it comes to error object, so error object is the most important thing in MuleSoft. So how it is going to create means whenever there is an error occurred in a flow in MuleSoft, so by default an error object is going to create. So error object means, so in error object contains many properties. So it contains built-in built-in informations like error description, error type, and etc. So in error dot description is the main, it's a string because we can see what is exact explanation about that error in description part. When it comes to error type is the one it will be explaining on which connector and what is the issue, what is the error that we are getting. So and when it comes to error type, so error type is a combination of namespace identifier. So in this example, like I mentioned here, mule colon unknown and http colon connectivity. So mule is the namespace and unknown is the identifier. So like that, http colon connectivity means if you are connecting to third-party application from the third-party application, so we will be getting connectivity issue and we are using http requester for it. So in this case, the error type will be http colon and the connectivity. Connectivity is the identifier and HTTP is the namespace. So how to identify the error types? So since in Mule, so if you are using HTTP connector to connect to third-party application, or else if you are using database connectors to connect to a database and perform read and write operations. So in this case, Mule will automatically by default it will generate the error types So we can make use of those. So in the right hand side you can see, so there is a if you are using a DB connectors, you can see DB colon bad SQL syntax. So if anything errors in syntax of the query, so it will throw DB bad SQL syntax. So in these cases we can identify the errors based on the error type. So next, in Mule there are three error handling scopes. So we will be using these error handling scopes in different levels of error handling in MuleSoft. So let first discuss. First we'll see what these three will do. So there are three. One is on error continue, on error propagate, rise error, and we'll discuss detail in coming slides. First we'll discuss about on error propagate. So on error propagate means, so it will throw an error whenever after we handle the error. For example, what it will throw means, so it will just throw error attributes, for example, error description, error type, and proper error messages. So whenever an error occurred, and if we are using on error propagate, the process will not continue further. So for example, if any error occurred in this case, you can see there is a flow and we are connecting to third-party application. So that is causing the error. And since we are handling that error using on error propagate, and whatever we define within the on error propagate, it will get executed. But once it come out of this error handling on error propagate, it will throw the error back to the user with 500 status code and appropriate error message. And as I discussed, all the components that we are going to define within on error propagate will be executed. And at the end, so the request will go to error or listener. So on that time, it will throws an error back to the user with 500 and then internal server error, what are the appropriate error type and error message. So on error continue. So as the name indicates, on error continue, it will send the success response and 200 status code to the upper level or whatever the end users. For example, so whenever there is an error occurred in the while connected in third-party application, so an error occurred, and if you are using on error continue, it will execute all the components that will be defined within that on error continue, and then once after that, it will throw the request will back the user with not 500. It's time on error continue will throw 200 success response code and then appropriate error message. So for example, if you are using parent child hierarchy in this on error continue scope, for example, parent flow will call the child flow. So in the child flow, there is we are connecting to some third party application and it is failing. So in that case, and we have used on error continue to handle that error. So in this case, so the whatever the component that has been defined within order continue will get executed, and then it will not execute the remaining component in child flow. It will the response, the request will go back to the parent flow and it will execute whatever the remaining components in the parent flow, not in the child flow. So this is one of the major difference between on error continue and on error propagate. So when with respect to on error propagate, so it will not execute both in child flow and parent flow, but with respect to on error continue, it will execute in both child, not in child and in parent only. So next scope is rise error. So rise error component generates a mule error, means we can define our own error by defining a custom error type and custom description. So basically we will be using this rise error component to raise an error and by based on some condition according to the requirements. So and also while defining a custom error type, we cannot use the built-in error types. So as I mentioned here, so mule security, mule connectivity, and HTTP connectivity, DB is bad SQL syntax. So these are the ones that is already been taken, and we cannot use those to customize our error type. So how we can do the custom error types? How we can define? So according to requirement, if you are getting something or null payload, and we are sending a null payload from it, and we are doing a validation, and if we are using raise error, So we can mention it as like the namespace will be null and then the colon after the identifier will be payload. So in this kind of things we can make use of erase error and we can define our own customized error type. Let's see practically how we can handle the errors using these scopes. Now we'll see how the on error continue work in practically. So in this flow, what I have done is like I use a simple listener to call this flow. So in this first I am using a set payload component that we need to set some payload while we are sending a request to this some dummy URL. So here I set a payload as before HTTP request so that we can differentiate what or how the response will come once we handle the error. So in this case, this is a set payload component. At first I use before HTTP request once, and then in this requester component, I'm just using this dummy URL to connect to some URL. So once after that, I'm just at the end, I'm using again one more set payload. So after HTTP request, and then in on error continue, I'm handling only one error, that is HTTP connectivity issue, HTTP connectivity error type. So here we need to define that HTTP connectivity means it's an error type, right? So we need to define here. And also will be since we are using HTTP requester, we can get so many error types as well. So we can see here. So there is an HTTP bad gateway, bad request, client secret, connectivity, forbidden. So all this or we can make use of these error types and we can handle that particular error. So in this case, I'm just using HTTP connectivity error. I'm adding. So let's trigger it and then we'll see. So in this case, it's just a flow. I'm not talking about parent-child identity flow. So I'm just talking about a simple flow, how the honor container will work. So here, so if you go to the next thing, if you can see the payload has been set as before HTTP request. So when I'm trying to hit this, and I'm trying to connect with this URL, it is giving. So you can see I explained about error object. This is the error object. So immediately the error is come. So error object is created. So under the error object, you can see description, detailed description, error type, errors. So there are so many attributes within that. So mainly we will be using so description and error type, HTTP connectivity. You can see it is automatically thrown HTTP connectivity issue. So Mule has already identified it is related to HTTP and the issue is connectivity. So since we are handling that on error continue HTTP connectivity, so you can see. So if you go to that, it will come back to this flow and then it will execute whatever present in this. So in this on error continue, I have set the payload as connectivity error. So just to make sure what will be the output are going to get once the request has been completed. So if I click on next, so it will be done. See, it is not executed this after HTTP request. So when I go back to the request, so you can see even though if it is in a route, we are getting 200 OK and the error messages whatever I set in that on error continue. So it is a normal flow. This is how it is going to work. It will not execute this after HTTP request since it has been continued. Since we handle the error, it will done with the flow. So now we will see how we can handle using parent-child architecture. So here, this is the flow that is calling to this flow. It's a child flow now. It is a parent flow now. So I will be hitting this endpoint. It's a parent. So now the request comes here. So this flow reference component will invoke this child flow. So let's go to next. So now you can see. So it will come back to here and in here you can see. And again, I was getting HTTP connectivity issue. It's the same. It is expected. So now if you go back to this now on error continue and it will execute this component. But in this case, it is executing the set payload in the parent flow, but not in the child flow. So this is the one major difference about on error continue and on error propagate. So here you can see it is executing the parent flow component even though if it's error out in child flow. If you click on next and if you go back to the response postman, so you can see the payload I am set is after error response and the status code is 200 OK. So this is how on error continue will work. So now let's move on to on error propagate, how it is going to work. So now I will discuss about the normal flow using on continue. It's okay. Okay. So let's hit the endpoint. So now you can see here it is already come to this requester and it is actually throwing connectivity issue. So here in when it comes to on error continue, right, we get the 200 response and we are handling the same connectivity issue but using on error propagate. So if you go back to next, it will execute all as I mentioned. So it will execute all the components within say within the on error propagate flag. Now it is go back to click on next. So if you go back to the postman, you can see we have getting 500 server error along with the error message and error description that we got. You can see the URL provided must contain some scheme. So it's sometimes dummy URL I'm trying to insert. So it will be give the error response as this. So now we'll see about how we can handle in the parent child hierarchy. So now we'll try to hit this. Now the request control is come to here. So it will exactly throw an error that will be HTTP connectivity issue and then we are handling it in honor propagate. If you click on next, you can see in honor continue it will went to the software error response. But here in honor propagate, it is not going to that error. It will rise again the error. Even in parent flow, it will raise the error. So if you click on next, it will complete the execution and you can see we are getting 500 server error and with appropriate error message in it. So this is a major difference in on-error continue and on-error propagate. So now let's move on to raise error that we talked about. So this is a simple flow I have created to demonstrate the raise error component, how we can make utilize of it. So we can see in the raise error component, so I'm just checking a condition if the payload is empty or not. So once we check the condition, if it is true, if the payload is empty, I'm actually raising an error. So in this case, I can see I will just raise the error as this is my namespace, and then I will just say payload. So this is my own customized error type, and we can also mention so the payload. We can also mention the error description as well. So the payload is empty. So I'll just save it, and I will wait for it to deploy the changes. It will take a couple of seconds to rebuild it. So now it's completed. So now we'll see. So now the request is come to this. So now I'll click on it, and you can see in my body I have said nothing. It's empty. So this condition will get true, and then it will go to this is empty of payload and will raise component. So here, as I mentioned earlier, my error type is null payload, and description is payload is empty. So you can see here, if I click on, if I execute it, it will throw an error with my custom error type and my description is payload is empty. So this is how the raise error component will work. If we can define our own customized error type and also the description. So that's how in error object you can see the error type is null payload that I defined here and the description is payload is empty that I defined in this raise error component. So if I click on next, it will raise the error, and if we go back to this, so we are getting the status code as 500 and the error message that I put is payload is empty. So this is how the error handling scopes that will work in MuleSoft. Let's move on to the next topic. So now we completed this on error continue. Let's move on to the next. So in Mule, so we can handle the errors at the different levels. So one is default error handler, the other one is global or application level error handler, and we can also call it as customized global level error handler and flow level error handler, and also we can say processor level error handler. So now, we'll discuss about it. So first one is like a default error handler. So default error handler means if nothing is defined or we are not handling at any level, as I showed you right in honor continue or honor propagate, I am handling at the flow level. So in that particular to that flow, I am just making use of honor continue scope and honor propagate scope. I am handling that error and I'll be sending in appropriate error message and also the code status code. So in this case, default error handler means if nothing is defined and no handler is actually handling that error. So the MuleSoft has a default error handler. It will handle all the errors by itself, and it will log the appropriate error messages and error description and error status code in the console. It will be at the project level. So default error handler for project level, it will handle all the errors. So and also when error is occurred, it will stop the execution of the flow and logs the information about the error. So Mule default error handler acts the same for all the application and cannot be configured manually. So like we configured for arise error or any on error continue, so we cannot do that. It will be default and then it will be throw exact error and error messages to the user. So next move on to the global level handler. So the global level error handler is an error handling strategy in MuleSoft that allows you to define a single error handling flow that will handle any unhandled error that occur with your Mule application. So in this case, what will happen is since in the project level, so we have multiple XML files and multiple flows that we have defined in a project. So in that case, if you want identical error handling strategy that will handle all the errors from all the XMLs and all the flows, so we can make use of this global level error handler, and we can define our own our in a separate file. We can define this global level handler using error handler component, and then we can add multiple scopes into this, whether it is on error continue, on error propagate, and we can make use of we can add multiple scopes. For example, in this example, I took it as only on error continue, so that will be handling HTTP bad request and HTTP connectivity. So in the second on error propagate, I'm handling any type of error that is come from any of the flows. So this is the main use of global error handler. So we can customize our thing and we can define a single error handling strategy for all our Mule XML files. And also this global level handler will help the reusability of the application error handling block. Since even if we increase the XMLs or if you add new requirement, if you have any new flows, so we can still refer this global level handler so that we don't need to mention any separate exception strategy for in order to handle the errors. So one more thing. So since in order to use the global level handler, we need to define a global property called configuration in global element section. Once we define this in a separate file global level handler, so we need to go to the global element section in our MuleSoft, so where we can define there is one property called configuration, so we need to define that, and then after that only, so all the application at the project in that project, all the XMLs and all the flows can, whenever there is an occurred, so the request will come back to this global level handler. So even though in some cases, even though if we did not mention any global error handler or any flow level handler, so the MuleSoft default error handler will get executed. Default handler will handle that error and print its appropriate error message. So this is all about global level error handler. So flow level error handler. So flow level handler is the same that I explained for on error continue and on propagate. So if you want separate exception handling strategy to particular to that flow, we can make use of this flow error handler. So you can see in this example. So in this example, you can see the error handling section. I have used on error continue with transfer message. So this is how, if you want to handle the flow level at the flow level, if you want to handle error at the flow level, so we need to make use of the error handling scopes. So, and one more thing, flow level can be achieved. Flow level error handler can be achieved only in flows and private flows, but not in subflows, because subflows cannot have their own error handling strategy for them. So that's why we can only handle this flow level in flows and private flows. We cannot handle them in subflows. So this flow level error handler, when we can go for it, means whenever we need a separate exception strategy for particular to that flow. So in that case, we can go for this flow level error handler. So next is the final one is processor level error handler. It's an error handling strategy in MuleSoft that allows you to define a specific error handling strategy for a particular component in MuleSoft, whether it is in MuleFlow or subflow. So it can be achieved in all the flows. So because this processor level error handler is actually specific to a particular component. For example, if you are using a database connector or database operation, so we want exception strategy for the select statement or insert statement. So in this case, we can make use of this try catch block. So this processor level handler will be achieved through try catch block. So we can make use of try catch block with particular to that component, and we can define our own exception strategy by using error handling scopes. So one more advantage of this processor level handler is it will support the transaction management. Suppose if you are, what is transaction management means? So when we are dealing with the database operation insert statements, if anything errors out in between, so all the data that has been inserted into the database, so it will all get rolled back. So that is one of the main advantage of using try catch block. We can achieve this transaction management. So, and also if any error comes related to this database component with particular to that component, so we can handle any exceptions. Then one of the major advantage of this. Let's see practically how we can handle the errors in different levels. First, we will see about default error handler. So what default handler means, as we discussed, it will not the error that we are getting from any components. So that will be handled by MuleSoft itself. So we cannot actually change the error type or modify manually whatever the payload, maybe the status code. Okay, so all those things we are not able to modify that. So because it has been handled by MuleSoft and it will be a default values. So then let's see how it is going to handle and see what will be the payload once we handle that error the MuleSoft will give. Let put a breakpoint here. So now the request comes here. So when the request is executed, it will throw an error. So you can see I haven't defined any flow or any on error continue scopes. Okay, on error continue, on error propagate, or I don't have any global level error handler as well. So since we are not handling that error anywhere in this project, okay. So in this case, what will happen is, so once you can see the type is HTTP connectivity and the description is this is something like must contain some scheme, it is failed, some dummy error. Okay, so now I will execute it. So once it's executed, if you come back to the request, you can see the body is like the description that I showed you. I haven't done anything, I haven't modified it. Look, MuleSoft itself will give us the payload as the error.description, and the status code is 500 server error. So how? And also one more thing you can identify is here. So you can see in the logs, in the console, in the logs, you can see it has print the message, like message or error details. What is the message and where it is failing? You can see it is also showing that in this XML it is failing at 9th line. So this is and also error type. So these are the details that will be printed by default error handler. Not only default error handler. For example, if we use in console, like whenever there is an occurred and whenever we handle that error, that error details will be logged in console. Okay, so this is how it will be default error will handle and the response will come. So one more thing, you may be wondering how this is coming. The only error dot description, why can't like everything in error object? So if you go to the listener here, we have an option called responses. This one. So if you go to the listener here, you can see there is an option called responses. In this responses, you can come out, if you scroll down, you can see the error response. So this is the actual body that when the MuleSoft handles error by using default error handler. So the error message that will be come to like that will be set as a response is this one, error.description. And we have mentioned those like output type as well. It will be in text slash plain format, and the body will be error.description. Status code will be whatever we are getting from this request component, that will be the default one. We are not setting that status code as well. If you want to send some specific status code as well, we can set it here. So otherwise you can just leave it, but in this default error handler we cannot modify, right? So this will be, it will be the configuration and listener. Okay, so in this listener by default it will be error description is the body for it. Okay, so this is how we are getting this body from the HTTP listener. So this is about our default level error handler. So let's move on to the flow level error handling. So flow error handling means, as we already discussed about scopes, right? So by using error handling scopes, we can achieve the flow level error handling. Flow level means, see, consider this is a flow. Let's hide this out. So consider this one flow. So in this flow, we have some set payload. There are two set payloads, and we have one request, one HTTP request connector. So suppose now we are getting an error in this requester. So now previously, as we discussed about default error handler, is nothing is specified in this error handling section. So this will be handled by default error handler. That will be default. Okay, it's not a flow level. So if you want to handle an error particular to this flow, whatever the components is failing within this flow, we need to handle particular to this flow. So we can make use of this error handling section in all the flows, private flows and the flow, but not in the subflow. So I will show you why we are not able to handle the flow level handling in subflow. So if I grab here the subflow, you can see there is no error handling part in this subflow. This is the subflow, error handling subflow. But in this section, you can see in this subflow, we don't have option for error handling. So if we don't have an option called error handling, that will consider as an subflow. Okay. So for this purpose, we cannot achieve error handling in subflow. Okay, I think you got it right. So this is the reason why we are not able to achieve the error handling at flow level in subflow. Okay, so the private flow and then the normal flow we can achieve because we'll be having an option called error handling here. So now for this entire flow, we have written a logic that will be like on error container will handle the errors. For example, if we are getting more, like if we have 3 more HTTP request components, so we can go with like we can specify their error type that we want to handle. For example, now I am just specified HTTP connectivity. So this I need to only handle this error in this flow level handling. If any other error comes out of this requester, for example, if we get bad request, right, 400 bad request. So in this case, since I'm not handling it, so that will be again handled at the handled by default error handler. It will not be handled at flow level, so it will go to the default. Why? Because we are not handling that particular error. So something has to be handled, right? That's why MuleSoft will have a default error handler. If it is handling at a flow level, so then it should be fine. This flow level error handling will take care of that error. But if it is not handling at the flow level, particular to the error type, so the default error, it will be handled by default level error handler. Okay, so don't get confused. This is the only thing. So flow level means it will be with respect to this flow will be handling. For example, now I know the error that is coming from this HTTP requester. I am getting HTTP connectivity issue. So for that reason, I am just handling the HTTP connectivity here. So now let me trigger. So the request comes here. So from this HTTP request, so I'll be getting an HTTP connectivity issue. You can see here. And then previously in default error handler, we saw like that the message will be the error.description, right? because that we are not actually set anything, we cannot able to modify that. So since we are handling a flow level handler, we can able to modify the payload as well, what we need, what we want to send as a response from this flow. So now it come back to this, since we're handling the HTTP connectivity, on error continue will always return success response, means 200 okay, to the upper layers. So now if I click on next, the payload has been, what the payload I have set is connectivity error. It is not the error description. So if I click on next here, you can see in the console, I told you, right, regardless of the error handler, levels of error handler, so all the things will be printed in logs. So now if you go to the request again, so you can see the, since we are using on error continue, even though we are getting 500, but as a for the response we are getting 200. Why? Because we are using on error continue scope, and the set payload that has been set here, so it is coming. Connectivity error is set here, so that payload is coming in here. So this is about flow level error handling. So we can use any other thing. You can use on error propagate as well, one more one, and you can handle. You can have the flow means it will not be like restrict to only these things. Okay, it can be a like lengthy flow. You can have about 10 to 15 components in this. In that cases, you can handle. In this cases, if you know the error type, that what will be the possible error type that we'll be getting, we can mention it here. Otherwise, you have an option called any. If you click on any, all as I told you earlier, so whenever there is based on the components of MuleSoft will be generated an error type. Okay, so possible occurrence of error types. So in this case, if you click on any, so whatever the error will come, regardless of error type, it will handle everything in this on error continue at this flow level. Okay, so this is one of the this is about flow level error handling. So let's move on to processor level error handling. So as I told you, processor level error handling means, so it will be the component level. It will not be the flow level, or it will be the not be the default. Okay, it is specific to component level. Means component means we have a set of components. Now we can see select, transform message. So this logger is a component, and we see HTTP request. It is also one of the components. Set point is of a component. So this like this. This will, for example, now I want to handle the error particular to this select or error or the request here, particular to this request. Since we are, you can see here, we're handling at the flow level, right? We can also handle in this flow level itself. We can also handle the error in a component level as well. So what we need to do is we just need to use the try scope. So try scope, using this try scope, we can handle the error at the component level. So you just need to, what you need to do, so you just need to drag this into this try block, and then you can see now you got error handling option here. So if you get an error handling option here, you can add whatever for example on error continue. So you can handle the error particular to this component. So in this case, if I run this flow, since I'm getting this HTTP connectivity issue, so it will be handled here. It will be handled here. It will not go to the flow level because we are handling that particular error here. Okay, so this is how we are going to achieve the processor level handling using try block. Okay, and let's come back to the example that I already prepared. So in this try block, you can see I have used the on error continue and on error propagate. Okay, there are two components. Both the scopes has been handled by different error types. One is bad SQL syntax, one is DB connectivity. Okay, and also explained about it supports transaction management. Okay, so you can see if you click on the try block, you can see transactional action is indifferent and transaction type. So we have multiple transactional action. We can make use of based on our requirement. We can make use of any of this. So by default, it will be indifferent, and transaction type is local. And there are two options, exe and local. So based on a requirement, we can choose whatever the transaction management action and type we want. So we can based on that, we can implement our requirements. So in this case, like I have something called select. Okay, so this is my simple query that I will be connecting to my local like SQL server. So I have a developer 3 is a table, my table name. So I will be hitting this endpoint and we'll see what type of error we'll get. So since I have, for this one, I've made some changes. Okay, so in order to get the error, so for that I will be getting an error as connectivity issue. Let's hit the end. point. We'll see. Did I? Yeah. So now you can see it will come. So it will enter into the try block. If I click on next, it will throw DB connectivity issue. Okay. So since you can see here, so we are handling at component level. You can see there is nothing in the flow level. Okay. Okay. So now I'll just click on next. So DB connectivity I'm handling using on-error propagate. So it will come back here. I'm not setting anything. Okay. You can see I'm not setting anything. I'm just I just use the logger and then I will click on next. So you may be wondering, right? So what will happen if like this transform message, will it be executed or not? You can see since we are using on-error continue, on-error propagate here. Okay. So if you are not using on-error propagate, so it will, if you are using on-error continue, so even though this component is erroring out, since we are handling that error, the next component will be executed and it will continue the process. It will not stop it here only. Since we are using on-error propagate, so it will not continue the execution. As I explained already, it will be stopped here and it will throw the error back. You can see now, so even though if you handle the error, it has thrown the error back. If you click on next, so the error will be like this. And the error type, the code will be 500 server error. So now what I will do is, like, since I have handled DB connectivity using on-error continue, I'll make some change. The reason it is failing because I just used this localhost. Okay. So now what I will do is I will just make the change to get the DB bad SQL syntax. Okay. I'll just remove this star. So it will give us the bad SQL query and syntax error. Then I will save it. Let's wait for it to deploy. So now it has been deployed. So we'll try to hit again. So now go to next. So next. You can see now it is giving DB bad SQL syntax. Okay. So now what will happen is, since we are handling the error type here, so it will click on next and it will come back to the on-error continue. So now you can see in the on-error propagate. So even once we handle the error in this, and then it has thrown the error back. Okay. It is not executed this transform message. So now since we are using on-error continue scope, you can see, click on next. So it will execute this transform message. Okay. So one of the main advantage of handling the error at component level is, suppose if we have a scenario where you need to continue the process even though that particular component is failing for some reasons. I don't want to break the flow. Okay. I want to execute all the components in that flow even though some particular component is failing. So in this case, so we can make use of this try block. You can handle the error, and in that you cannot use on-error propagate. In this scenario, if you want to continue, you should use on-error continue, and you can store that error, whatever we are getting in this one in a variable or something, and then you can continue the further processing in the flow. So this is one of the main advantage of using component processor level handler. So now you can see, right, even though if you get an error, it is continuing the flow and it will execute this transform message. So now you can see 200 okay and some Java response. So this is how the processor level handler will work, and how you are going to make use of this. So now finally, let's move on to the final topic. It will be global error handling. So how we can actually create a logic to handle globally at the project level. Okay. You can say, when I say global, it will be a project level. So we have default error is always project level, but it is not configurable manually. But flow level will be particular to that flow, and when it comes to processor level, it will be particular to that component. So now we are talking about global error handling, means it will be limited to project level. Okay. So I have created a simple the same thing I have used for honor continue and flow level error handling. So I create the same scenario for global error handling. So before that, so I will show you how to implement a logic global error handler by using which component and everything. Okay. So before going further, if you already know I need to implement global error handler, so you just need to make use of. Let me close this all. Since already implemented, I want to show you again. So you can just type error. So you can see there are three. So since we already know about on error, continue, propagate, and raise error, we already discussed about it. So one thing we haven't discussed is error handler. So this error handler will help us to add or implement error like error handling logic at the global level or project level. So now you can see it will just provide the option to implement our logic or error handling logic just like the way it is in flow level. You can see this is error handling, right? So this option will not come for subflow. You can see, right? So for that person, that is one of the reason. And the other main reason is so we can implement this. If you want to implement global error handling, we need to make use of this error handler. So now you can see we can add as many number of on error continue, on error propagate here. See, this will provide us the option to implement our error handling logic to the project level. So this is how we are going to add. That is how we are going to create error handler in MuleSoft by using global. Okay, by using this error handler in MuleSoft. So I will delete this. This I just wanted to show you how we can do that. Since I already implemented it, so I will just show you that as well. You can see now I already created global error handler. So in this I used on error continue and on error propagate. So one is on error continue. So in this I'm using HTTP bad request and HTTP internal server. So these are the two error types I'm handling in this on error continue, and on error propagate is I'm using everything. Any means already explained, right? So any means all the error type that will be that possibly coming out from the component that will be present in the flow. So all the error will be handled here. So in this error handler, so I'm just using error description as my payload, and the status code I'm just setting manually 500. So this is one of the reason if you use global level, processor level, or flow level, we can define our own status code and can define our own error payload. So here also I just 200, even though it will give, but I'm just setting manually to show how we can set. So in MuleSoft, if you want to set the status code as manually, so you need to use a variable. So in that variable, you need to use this name, HTTP status. So and then the value, it will be whatever the error type, whatever the error code you want. So this is the global error handler. So this is how we are going to define, and you can implement the logic within this. So now, so one more thing. So since we defined it, and we have also defined this global error handling, like the flow, simple flow to handle that error, to create an error. So, but our MuleSoft will not know, right? So since this is this connected? No, because it's not a flow level. It's a global. It is separate, and this is separate, and this is separate. But now the MuleSoft will has to know whenever there is an error it's occurred in any of the flow in this project, so it should come back to this. It should be handled by using global error handler, right? If you don't specify, the MuleSoft will not know, so it will handle by using default error handler. So for that reason, we need to do one more thing. You can see in this XML file, every XML has three parts: message flow, global elements, and configuration XML. So message flow means where we are going to implement our logic by dragging and dropping the components. Global elements means where we are going to define a property or particular to that component. And configuration XML means we have the XML code, proper XML code related to those components. So here we need to do one more thing in order to connect that global error handler to this project. So if you can see, if you come back to this and we can click on create. So under the global configuration, you can see there is a configuration. If you don't know that, you just need to come search here, and then if you search it here as configuration, you can see there is option called configuration. So here what we are doing is we are setting a global property to tell to our MuleSoft, okay, runtime. So whenever there is an occurred in that flow at this project, so all the errors should handle by using default this error handler global. So you can see there is an option called, we need to choose that error here. So if you click on this, it will automatically pop up because that I already defined it. So this is my flow global error handler name, flow name. So if I click on this, and then if I click on OK, that will be done. So now MuleSoft will know whenever there is an occur, the error will be handled by using global error handler. How? Because you can see there is the name itself, it suggests default error handler. So we are making this global error handler as a default error handler so that our MuleSoft will know whenever there is an error occurred in this project. So all the errors should be handled by using global error handler. So this is one of the main if you don't define this, so our MuleSoft will not know about this and it will be handled by using default error handler. It will not come to global error handler. Okay. So you need to do this and then only the user will know, okay, so there is an occur, there is a global property defined. I need to go to this instead of my default error. Okay. So now if I click on OK, so if I click on OK, it will be done. So since I already defined here, I'll show you that as well. So I am not going to do it again. So this is my default error handler. I already selected it and click on OK. That's it. So now once you click on it, save and redeploy. So it will be done. So now I'll just try to hit it here. So you can see now I just use the same use case. I'll try to hit again. I'll make use of this one only. Global. Let me put a brief. Sorry. Yeah. So when the request comes here, so if I click on next, so this HTTP request will throw an error. So I'm getting HTTP connectivity. So you can see here I'm not handling that error in this on error continue by defining manually the error types. So I'm only handling two internal server and bad request, but I'm getting HTTP connectivity. So in this on error propagate, I have defined any, right? So let's see where it will go. So I have an error here. And also we have mentioned to the MuleSoft by configuring this property. So whenever there is an occurred, it should go to this global error handler, not to the default error handler. Okay. So click on next. See, it is directly come to the global error handler and to the any, because in this on error continue we are not handling that error, right? So that's why. So as usual, on error propagate will handle, and then the payload will be set as error.description and the status code will be 500 and it will be done. You can see it is not execute this auto HTTP request because we don't have that. An error propagate will not work in that way. Okay? So to come back to this, the error description that I've set and error code is 500. So this is how the global error handler will work. And suppose when you are going for these approaches, so whenever there is an multiple XMLs that has been defined under this project. So for example, in my case, I have error handling project. So in this, I have 4 XMLs. So for these 4 XMLs, I don't want any specific, I don't have any specific error handling logic defined in these flows, in this XMLs. So in this case, I can define one more, I can create one more like XML file. And then within that, I can define this. So almost one of my advice is whenever you are trying to create a global error handler, so try to create it in a separate XML file where you don't have any other logic defined in this. So that is my one of the advice, because it will be all right. This error handler will be used for all the projects in this flow. So it will be separate. If it is one of the best practice, if you keep it is separate. That's it. So this is all about how to handle the errors in a different level in MuleSoft. I hope you understand very well. So finally, we have reached the end of our presentation. So I'm now open to question and answers. Feel free to post your questions so I'll be able to answer.
Hi Vijeth, this is Mohan. Am I audible?
Yes, Mohan.
Yeah, I have a good question here. So as you mentioned, right, for subflows, you cannot handle errors. But what if any error occurs? Like, how can I handle this?
So in that case, you can make use of global error handler. So for subflows, for that kind of subflows, we can make use of global error handler to handle the error whatever we want, however we want. And also, if you want to handle the error at a component level as well, so you can just make use of try catch code. So that will be a very good approach.
Okay, Vijay.
Yeah.
Hi, Vijeth. Hi, Cindy.
How can we define single error handling strategy that will handle all errors?
Yeah. So just as to explain, like we can make use of the global level error handler so that we can define like single error handling strategy particular to that project. So for all the XML that has been there in this project, so we can that will refer to the global error handler. So that for all the flows and all the XMLs, so we'll be having a single strategy so that will handle all the errors. So
Thank you.
I think I have addressed all your query. So this concludes the webinar, and you will receive an email containing a link to this podcast. Thank you for your time, and we hope you have learned and enjoyed this presentation. See you soon in our next webinar. Thank you.